candid conversations, unfiltered opinions, and humor with AVAG Beck's podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. So glad you were able to make it here. I have somebody that I spoke to 3 weeks ago, but we had such a great conversation. I'm sorry I sound like a frog getting over something. So I have Kristine Gentry with me. Kristine is going to talk to us about her company and how she helps workplaces improve their culture and be more versatile. And I know the buzzword is DEI and how it's not what it is, but, we'll talk about that. Hi, Kristine. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for being here. So, Kristine, talking about workplace culture, what is that? What is it?
Great question. And I always like to start with actually a definition of culture, because I think a lot of people talk about culture these days and most don't really know what it is. Right. So I get all sorts of funny questions that just indicate people don't know what culture is. So culture is actually the learned and shared values and beliefs and patterns of behavior of a group of people. So it's in a workplace, it's how things are done. It includes both formal written policies and procedures. So like your employee handbook, all your benefits, any formal things that you have to follow are part of the company culture. But it's also the unspoken and unwritten rules and patterns of behavior in that organization. So culture includes like power struggles, power dynamics, who is invited to different meetings, who speaks at different meetings, where people sit. It's usually not something that's really discussed, but it's part of the culture. It also has to do with like, what time do you really start and end? What time, do people go home at night? Do they work when they're home? Are they, do you take lunch breaks? Does everyone work through lunch? All these things about really how work is actually done is part of our culture. So companies teach us what they value. Really, the leaders show what they value, and values are a big part of culture. So a lot of times we'll, hear companies or see companies post their values on their wall, and they're like, yes, we focus on culture. And ideally, the leaders live those values and exhibit values, and they're the example. And then the employees know, okay, I'm going to make decisions based on these values because this is what's important to my company. And in reality, that may or may not happen, right? Sometimes leaders talk about values, or maybe they picked values at one point and they're on the wall and nobody ever thinks about them again. That would also be part of the culture, right? Yes, someone identified some values, but nobody knows what they are. And so they're actually motivated and decisions are made by other values that are unspoken. So maybe it's whatever the company leaders focus on and ask people to do, then that's how they make decisions. So culture is about our values. It's shared among a group of people. It's also learned. So I always think that part is important. We tend to think about our own cultures, especially in a broader sense, like when we're thinking about our, whether it's our ethnicity or our religion, that our way is right because we believe it's right? But we have to realize that we are taught that, and we are taught our values. We're taught how to act in a way that makes sense for our group, whatever it is. And other groups are taught different things because that's what makes sense for that group of people. So I'm fascinated by cultures. I love studying cultures. We can talk about cultures on all different levels too, right? A lot of times, and I'm an anthropologist. So the reason I talk about culture, I'm a cultural anthropologist, and the field of anthropology came up with the concept of culture. So when we first started, it was back in the colonial days when explorers were going out and conquering the world and coming across different people and being like, oh, wow, they're so different from us. They talk different. Their food is different, but even their social structures are different. Their economic systems are different. All these things are different. And they labeled it as culture and started learning about all these different cultures that exist in the world. And then now we kind of progress in anthropology from just studying other people in these far away exotic places to realizing, oh, we have culture, and our culture impacts so much about the way we live. So, and we can study culture locally, in whether it's our own communities or like I do in businesses, and look at how we can shape culture to address problems in the workplace to create the best environment where people can do their best work.
Beautiful. So in terms of culture, I'm going to ask a two-part question. So you talked about workplace culture where the owners and the leaders have come up with a set of values, workplace values, and this is what our company represents. And it sounds good on paper, right? It sounds great for marketing, right? It goes in every employment handbook. However, the action within the company is different, very different once you get in there. And at the premise of either asking questions about that, it turns into retaliation, right? What should an employee do? You said something about different cultures or different workplaces have cultures depending on what is driving them, right? Should a workplace be honest about the driving factor as opposed to putting out this false advertisement that they are something when they're really not in reality?
Yes. So I think when a company expresses its culture and says we are X, Y, and Z, and they don't do anything close to X, Y, and Z, I think they are automatically setting themselves up to have employees that are disengaged. And we know statistically that 30% of workers, only 30% of workers in the US are engaged. So 70% are not. And that's right there a big reason. If companies are presenting themselves one way, but internally they act a totally different way, that sets up mistrust, confusion. People feel cheated if they went to a company because of, they highlighted certain values, and then people get in there and say, oh, these aren't the real values at all. Like, you can use culture to do really good things, but if you kind of fake culture, which I would say you do, if you have values that you don't live by at all, you're pretending we're this great company, we're really something different, you can hurt yourself. You can hurt your company even more. Like, I think it would be better for a company to not talk about values at all if their true values are not things they want to be known for. It's because then you don't have that big discrepancy that people, people get in there and they start working and they go, oh, what we really care about is profit, period. It doesn't matter so we don't care about safety. We don't care about our customers. We just profit. If that's the case, it's better to not say that you care about other things ahead of that, right? Because you're just creating a disingenuous culture and with a bunch of employees who are going to be unsatisfied. So I think if someone gets in an environment like that, it's difficult. I think there are a lot of companies that operate that way, and that's probably why we have such low disengagement numbers. I think as people, we have to focus on what we can change and know there's things about the world and our environments, our workplace that we can't change, and you let go what you can't change. So maybe you focus on just how can you work in the best way possible that aligns with your values. If you're doing something at work that goes against your values, you're not going to be happy, period, right? So if that's what you're being asked to do, then maybe you look for another job, or, you try to minimize when you're going against your own values, or you just make the changes that you can in whatever small way you can, whether it's for your team, your coworker, maybe you have a bigger team you can influence. Maybe you know that as you do better in your job, you're going to move up and you can change from within. You can help change the structure of the organization depending on the company. But I do want to say there are some wonderfully successful companies that focus on culture, and they do a really great job, and they are who they say they are. And that's when culture really works. And we see, there's so many studies of these companies that have good, strong cultures, and their overall performance is so much higher than companies that don't. So it's important to get right, because culture really does impact your overall business success.
Absolutely. I do agree. So talking about culture, you're a cultural anthropologist, and for us to get to the definition of culture is the ability to recognize the differences that exist and how it is welcoming. So what is your take on a company who serves a diverse population on not having that representation on their staff?
I would think that's highly problematic, because if you don't have the representation of the people you're serving, you're not going to know what they need. You're not going to know what they want. You're going to miss the boat. So, and again, there's so many statistics that show diversity. Companies with diverse workforces are more innovative. They do better overall. Diversity is so important for company's success. But particularly if you're trying to work with any kind of diverse population, you need to understand their experience, their lived experience, and what they want and what drives them, what they value. And if you don't have people on the inside who represent those people, I don't think you'll be successful, really. You're, maybe for a little bit, maybe for a while, maybe if you're the only one offering that service, but you're not going to be as successful as you could be if you actually have the representation within the organization. So, I think it's a good point. And of course, everyone's talking about DEI today. And I do want to address, I've had people say, do you say culture because as a euphemism for DEI? Is that so you don't have to talk about DEI? And the answer to that is no. Like, culture is one thing that's much broader. It's a much broader concept than diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is very much focused on specifically making sure that your company is diverse internally, but also in who you serve and where you get suppliers from, and that you're recruiting from diverse places, all these different things. And then that once people are in the organization, that they are treated equitably, which we know, I hate to even have to go into why it's so important, but it is so important. We know that so many things, all of our leaders in so many different organizations are white men, and they have been for a really long time. And it's made things not as good as they should be when, say, for instance, healthcare, and most healthcare studies were done on white men. So we don't know how different drugs impact females or females of all different races. We don't have many studies on that. We are just now starting to address that, or we were before the current administration has now come in and said we can't talk about whether you're male or female or anything else. So that has implications for healthcare, and women have more adverse side effects from medicine because they weren't studied in the initial trials. We have the same studies with automobile manufacturing. The crash test dummies are based on male bodies. So women are 70% more likely to be injured in the same car accident than men. 70%. That's huge. We design cars for male bodies and assume that everyone else will be fine. Forget children. At least they have now car seats, so we can protect them better that way. And they only recently started to have female size crash test dummies. So now they are starting to address that. But, it's things like that we have done for generations. That the assumption is, the norm is the white male, and everyone else can, we don't need to think about the differences and diversity in whatever we're manufacturing. But the same happens for, leadership. You can have 1 million people. The numbers have been, for a while, have shown that more women, and specifically more minority women, like African American and I believe Hispanic, Latina as well, are graduating from college. So we have the most educated people in our country now are females, and a lot are minority females, but yet it's not represented in the leadership levels of any organization across the board. When you just look at the statistics, it's still white males leading everything, even if they have less education, even if they have less qualifications. So we still need help to try to make things equitable, where white men aren't just promoting other white men, where they're actually looking at qualifications of all the people to see who is most qualified for the position. And it's actually completely opposite of the concern right now about DEI, where they think, oh, DEI means you give the job to whoever is not a white male, when in fact DEI pushes, let's not just continue to give everything to the white males, let's look at who's qualified. It's totally looking at the qualifications and expanding our pool of qualified people, not just the next white male's best friend, but all the people who've been are experienced and qualified for the position.
I'm so glad you brought in picking your best friend, because there are companies that have people grandfathered in, and there are companies that, again, talking about those values, but they fail to understand in touting these values, you also have to live by it in valuing hiring people who are qualified, not because your brother-in-law's sister-in-law's cousin aren't, and, is Sarah's next door neighbor, and yet children play lacrosse together, so she's the right fit for the job. And more than now, I care to really admit, because it is almost an every minute thing in America. I've experienced it. I know people that look like me have experienced this quite a bit. Is that when you present with knowledge and with experience in the midst of people that do not have the educational level that you may have, like you mentioned, Black women are the most educated demographic here in the United States, followed by Hispanic women, and it goes on. There's usually a dumping of responsibility because of the incompetence of the people that are supposed to do these jobs, right? And in addition to that, there's usually a clique mentality to bring frivolous report to HR and PIP that are merited. So what can you say would come to companies who may be going down this cultural path, or who actively practice this, where people are grandfathered into roles that they may not qualify for, both in education and experience?
I mean, I think a really good company would look, if they've done that, and say, and look at, like, constantly evaluate the qualifications, and not only qualifications, but the actual achievements and accomplishments of the people in different roles. And so if they were doing this, they would know, just because this person got this position doesn't mean they're the best qualified in that situation, right? Maybe they're not the best qualified. And are they producing? And a lot of times, no, they're not. So I think some companies, it's such an interesting point. I know I was talking to someone who works for a large oil and gas company, and several years ago, and like literally 3 or 4 years ago, they made everyone reapply for jobs. And they did a whole big reorganization. And at the time I thought, well, that's ridiculous. But I think if it was done properly, it may have been really smart. It may have addressed this exact issue, right? Because you had to reapply, and they were looking at qualifications and experience and achievement since you've been at the company to make sure they have the right people in all the right positions. I think if there are companies that know, like, yes, we've just been letting people hire their neighbor and their best friend and whoever, and we haven't paid attention to qualifications, honestly, the company is probably not doing great, right? Or even if they are, say they're like, oh, we're profitable, things are fine. Mm-hmm. Well, they would be doing a whole lot better if they actually had really qualified, experienced people in those positions. So I do think there should be, and this goes back to like why we need DEI. You need HRs to review and make sure that the people who are in all the positions have the skills they should. They have the education, they have the experience, and someone on the management level, whoever's managing the leadership level, needs to make sure that these people are doing their work and meeting their goals and hitting their targets. And any organization that's not meeting their goals, that's because of a culture problem. And I would say this is a huge culture problem. Like, any people problems are culture problems. So if you're not meeting your goals, you're not meeting your deadlines, your business isn't doing what you want it to do, that means there's a culture problem somewhere. And that's the part where, there's so many different ways you can have people problems, and where culture can be a problem. But this is a really good one, and difficult, because you have people who've been like, well, I've been here for 20 years and I'm fine, and this person should be protected because they've been there a long time. But if that person's not producing, I think, everything people are claiming about why we want to reevaluate what the government's doing, it's about, are we doing the best job we can? Well, it should be the same anywhere, right? Are people actually meeting the roles and responsibilities they've been assigned? And are they doing their work? Or is it falling off on someone else to clean up and pick up after them? And yeah, I'm with you on the, I think we all are. Anyone who's done teamwork, which you do when you work in an office, right? There's always people who don't do anything or are part of the team, and a few who do all the work, and yet it's somehow a team project. Like, there's a lot of picking up the slack for people who get away with doing the bare minimum. And that sets the stage for horrible culture, and which means for a company that's not going to do well. And maybe they're doing okay, but it's not going to last. They're not going to continue to keep. I think for companies to continue to exist, they all have to be able to innovate and evolve. Things are changing so fast in all industries that the best companies are going to be the ones who can keep up with it. And the companies who can keep up with it are going to have the best and the brightest, most accomplished people working for them. And that is, includes diversity, so that you can be innovative. So yeah, I think companies that know that they don't have the right people really should stop and look and make sure you get the right people and make sure you have the right people in the right positions. And that's all what DEI tries to achieve, right? Is let's not try to take away some of the assumptions, the biases, and making sure you have the best people in the jobs. And we know that historically, I mean, it's human nature to want to be around people who you are like, right? Mm-hmm. So we are asking people to fight human nature and know, like, I mean, I think a great leader knows what their strengths are and their weaknesses and gets people who can fill in. I don't want someone working for me who is exactly like me. Like, I don't really need another me. I need someone who can do the things I can't do, right? I want someone who's smarter than me at whatever I'm hiring them to do, or else I would just do that part. You know, you don't want someone, again, who looks just like you, because you're not going to have a whole picture of whatever your audience is, who you're trying to work with. And in the world we live in now too, it's such a diverse world. I can't imagine any company that isn't marketing to all different people. So, you know, I live in Houston, and specifically in Fort Bend County. We are one of the most diverse counties in the country, where we have like 30% Asian, 30% African-American, 30% Hispanic. I totally overdid that. I don't think it's not as high African-American. It's Asian, Hispanic, and white are all 30%, and then African-American. So it's, you know, all different. We have like 5 different languages minimum that, you know, all of the like government publications are produced in to try to communicate with people. When my kids go to school, they're dealing with people from all over the world, which is why we live here. I mean, that's fabulous. I love it. But that also means in our work environments, you're dealing with people from all over the world in any job in this area. So if we don't learn how to work together with people from different places, we're going to have a hard time in our work. But then we also know our customers are from all over the world. So I think we're in a great place here to figure these dynamics out. That's what a lot of the, you know, leaders in Houston always say. We're kind of a great example we're a little ahead of where a lot of the country will eventually be in terms of diversity. We're trying to figure it out right now, right? How do you have a good mix of people from all these different ethnicities and races working together? And how do you create solutions for all of our different populations, people from all over the world, and all the different things we're building in the city and things we create and services and products and everything. And we're still figuring out. It's not like we are perfect with it. But it's something that all companies need to do, right? We all have diverse customers at the very least. And if you're not diverse internally, you're going to miss out.
Yeah. So you said something about having the right people in the right position. And I need to put that on a t-shirt, because more often than not, I see people hiring based on relatability and commonality as opposed to experience, which leads to excusing bad behavior, which leads to that clique mentality of coming together to pick on because, oh my God, I just love her, I prefer her, kind of a behavior. And that happens a lot in the workplace, not just in the corporate workspace, but any workspace. And some organizations are fine with that. They either have a salesperson or an owner that has the gift of gab, right? They can talk their ways into anything and carry that mission statement that is false when it comes to the company and the company practices internally, but they're able to present a certain way that everybody feels that the best thing since sliced bread. So in cultures like that, where success is based on how many contracts they're able to fulfill or how many customers they're able to maintain or how much they made in a fiscal year, right? When success is based on that, is there something that is missed? Because again, it's a business, right? A business is focused on profit. So when success is focused on profit or profitability and not everything else or anything else, because again, I'm in the black, I'm not in red, that's my focus. Is there a way for that company? What can you say to a company like that? That your roster, your staff roster looks like, 1702 as opposed to 2025.
So what I would say, I mean, I think every company is, in business make money, even nonprofits. You got to stay in the black to survive, right? So that's the overall goal, is making money. But if you know, say internally you have a very, I'm just going to go with the white team, and especially white male team, it's just a red flag. And you should be telling yourself, well, gosh, if we had some diversity, how much better would we be doing? Right. And I think, anyone in this day and age who has an all white male team probably doesn't care. It's got to be intentional. You're intentionally only hiring white males at this point, right? But I would tell them, look, whatever numbers you're making, you could make a lot more with a diverse team. You just could. There's so many statistics, reports, data that shows that companies that have diverse teams do better. I would really go into innovation. Like if you have a whole bunch of men that all think the same, have all the same background, all the same experience, how are you going to create new things? How are you going to increase your market? Like who's your target audience? Let's look at what your market actually is and who you're going to. And I bet you they're going to other companies. They're marketing mostly to other white males, which is a declining percentage in our country, right? To continue to grow and do well, you've got to expand who you're marketing to. And to be able to do that, you're going to have a more diverse workforce. So I would say, if you want to do better, if you are looking at your company, and even if you want to continue long term, if the goal is for this company to continue, it's not going to continue. I just don't believe that companies that are very solidly only have one perspective are going to do well in the world we live in. It's changing way too much, and there's too much going on. There's too many different perspectives. Your customers are from all over the world. You cannot do well if you're only marketing or only, serving one very specific demographic. It's just not good for the long term. So I would tell them, if you're fine with this and you're fine with your company being, done in 5-10 years, okay, great, keep going. But whatever industry you're in, most likely there's going to be someone who's going to come and innovate, and they may put you out in 2 years, maybe a year. Things happen so fast. And you can point to, oh my gosh, how many companies, Blockbuster, how many companies that are dead because they didn't evolve and they didn't change with the times. And they thought they were fine. They were making a ton of money. They were great. They were huge. They didn't think they were going anywhere. And then they did, they're done. So they're also, in the work that I do, there comes a point of, I have to work with leaders who are open to realizing that they're going to have the best company they can have if they care about their people. And there are leaders who don't believe that. And it doesn't matter how much data you show them or how many stories you tell them of companies that are billion-dollar companies now because they focused on culture. They're just never going to change. And that's fine. I would move on and I'll say, I'm not investing in your company because you're not going to be around much longer. I think that's true. To me, that's reality. I believe that's fact. I fully believe that companies that refuse to evolve and diversify and change are not going to last. And so, that to me would just be a big red flag of where you don't want to work, a company I don't want to do business with. And, where I would be, even personally, I wouldn't want to do business with you as someone who helps people with their cultures. If that's your mentality, and you aren't coming to me saying, hey, I've got a problem. This is what I thought was right, but now I've realized this isn't the way forward. So help me change this. Then we could do something. But there are definitely people who are never going to change their mind, and they'll just run their companies into the ground.
Absolutely. I agree with you there that there are companies that what's the word I should use? It's not an entitlement, but more of a pride, because they have been in a particular lane for so long with not much of a competition. They feel like, okay, I'm great, I'll continue. You just never know when that competition is going to show up, and you don't just never know how that competition is going to show up in the marketplace and what effect that would have on you. People bank on their connections. People bank on their notoriety. And people bank on the false persona that they present when their company does not necessarily encompass what they portray it to be. Yeah. And often people are scared to speak up, or people who leave the company are, for reasons because of connections. They don't say anything for fear of being blackballed. It's just going to be a matter of time. But, do business the way you want to do business. So when we talk about not investing in a company or not working for a company. And this is gut feelings that I've ignored in the past. And I've wished I didn't ignore it. If I'm going in to interview at any place for employment, the one thing that I do is research. The same way the employer is researching me is the same way I'm also researching the employer. It is very important to me that I see not only a diverse group of customers, especially somebody in healthcare, that I also see a diverse group of providers, because I do know that commonality, right, can break the hardest ice. Somebody may not feel comfortable to say something in a certain way or something at all to somebody who may not look like them, but it takes maybe a sound or a look or an understanding, okay, what's going on, for the dam to break, right? So if I cannot help somebody and I cannot be the representation that I long to see, then I don't want to be there. If you're comfortable with grandfathering people into roles, if you're comfortable with your roster looking a certain way with maybe a few tokens here and there, then it's working for you and that's fine. But for people looking for jobs, I know sometimes you kind of like have to take what shows up because of financial need, whatever. But I would recommend that while you're there, take in the lay of the land and see where this takes you and see if this works for you. I don't know. What would you say about that, Kristine?
I totally agree. And especially my last role was in healthcare, and I've done a lot of consulting in healthcare as well. And I actually talked to a patient population. I did a study with the LGBTQIA group to try to understand their perspectives and their experiences when they went to get healthcare and what we could do to make things more comfortable for them. And it was so interesting. And exactly, their concern was, I'm looking for a provider who is in part of this community, because doctors who don't understand even our basic healthcare needs. Or, there was a lot of concern about biases, potential biases. There were so many concerns that they had that made them, a lot of them, simply avoid healthcare. Yeah. So especially in healthcare, you're so right that we've got to have that diversity and representation for all the populations. And healthcare, is one where you're serving everybody. So you've got to serve all the people. And I do know healthcare too is a place, at least a lot of the organizations I worked with, where there's a lot of diversity in terms of employees. And they can say, well, look, 50% of our population is a race or ethnic minority. But you got to go deeper and look at, well, who are the managers? Who are the leaders? Who's on your leadership team? And just having, one person on the leadership team who's a female or, another minority does not mean that the rest of the hierarchy is representative of the population that it should be. And a lot of times it's simply not, right? All the diversity is at the bottom, maybe one or two people at the top. And then, the rest of the leadership's position are most likely, white males or some white females, but, it's not representative of the people. And so that's, again, where, a focus on what's happening. Why are the people not moving up? And it's not because they're not qualified or experienced. That all then comes with bias and all these things of how we tend to promote people who are like us. What we really need to do is train our leaders to realize hiring people who are just like you isn't going to help you. You need the people who can't do what you're doing. You need to surround yourself with different people to get the different perspectives. So, and I think for those companies, those organizations, especially in healthcare, the best talent is gonna go to the companies that are more diverse, that treat their people well, right? And all the different people well. And I think there is enough competition that at least, at some different roles where the companies, the organizations that are not focused on diversity, they're still just hiring one demographic, aren't going to get the best people. You're automatically losing out on the best people because the ones who are most educated don't fit that demographic, right?
Yeah. I think sometimes a company misses the mark. It's great to give tokens and gifts, from time to time, but the one thing that I've seen companies miss is understanding how different cultures react to different things. If you have a demographic of people that are just like you and think like you, culturally the same, almost identical upbringing. And it might not be what other people want, right? If you're tokening gift here, maybe gift certificates or a freebie, whatever, but I feel like I'm not being heard. I'm still going to accept what you're offering, but it doesn't make me engage. That engagement you talked about. And talking about engagement, some organizations feel like forced engagement is the way to go. And if you're not engaged, then, you're just not a good fit, right? What do you have to say about that forced engagement?
Oh my goodness. I love that one.
Because as an African-American woman or an African woman, I fit into the African-American demographic. And a lot of minority communities are not oversharers, right? So when we are put in a position where we have to overshare about the color of our undies, what we did last week, who fell into the, all of this stuff is kind of like, oh my God, right? It's overwhelming. And we don't share. We may find something else to share in the meantime. And this usually does not bode well with a group of people who are comfortable with oversharing. So please, can you talk about that?
That is such a really good example that's something that we just don't think about. I was on a kind of higher level, I was always think about forced fun, when companies are like, everyone has to go to happy hour. And if you don't go, you're in trouble. Right. Or, it looks bad for the company. But come on, not everyone can go to happy hour. Like you have people who are alcoholics who shouldn't be there, for real. You have people who would rather focus on getting their actual work done and leave and get home to pick up their kids from school. Whatever the different reasons are, that happy hour isn't going to be good for everyone. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have it, but to mandate fun doesn't work for anyone. Nobody wants to be told they have to go participate in something fun. And that's kind of on a broader level, it relates to what you're talking about of you need to know your people and know what they enjoy doing and what's going to work and put out different offers depending on your company size, right? But not, I've talked to people who said, oh yeah, we have a great culture. We have happy hours once a month. That does not make a great culture at all. That means you do happy hours once a month. That's it. And maybe that helps with, some team bonding. Maybe it doesn't. Who knows what the impact is? Just happy hours on its own doesn't necessarily equal a good company or even a positive thing, depending on what's happening at those happy hours. Could be detrimental to your company if it's not going well. I don't know. But I think there are ways to combat that. And of course, diversity is one way, and making sure that whoever's on your teams talking about how we're going to get people engaged. How do we recognize and reward our people that there are diverse ideas represented and opinions? But I also think you just have to ask your people and know your people. And I've heard people talk about, I know people who have forums, they're like get to know me forums. And it's, what do you like? How do you like to be rewarded? How do you like to communicate, like communication preferences? But, some people don't want their birthdays celebrated. And some people think, you have to celebrate birthdays. Some people have real, very, significant reasons why they don't want their birthday celebrated. It's all those things we need to learn about each other and respect. And we also can't make assumptions that, well, I know this one person from Africa and she didn't like this. So now nobody from Africa likes this, or no African American likes this. Like, we are all individuals as well as being part of cultures. So I think that's where these kind of information sheets about people and really learning your team, if you're a leader, really helps. And where leaders can make a big difference, where, at a management level, you can also make or break your people's experience, and you can make up for a lot of stuff that comes from up high if it's not good. But as a manager, you can also kill the culture if they're doing all this work and trying to create a great culture, and you go, I don't care about that stuff. I don't have time for it. I'm not worried about it. Then all the great culture work just dies with your team. So the managers, they have the opportunity to figure out what does work for their team and build strong cultures, build teams. But you have to be aware of all the diversity and know that, no, not everyone's going to like to do the same things for team bonding. Some people don't want to bond at all. I do think there's so many studies on communication that show that teams that communicate more and communicate casually perform better than teams that don't. But it doesn't necessarily mean you have to bond. Like, we don't have to expect everyone to overshare. You can have some casual communication that's chit chat about the weather or your day, and that's conversation. Like, every conversation doesn't have to be bonding. You don't have to be best friends or know everyone's life story on your team. Some people want really strong boundaries from work and home, and that's fine, and we should respect that. And other people are oversharers, and there's no boundaries, and sometimes they need more boundaries, right? We got to learn too what's too much for work. So there can definitely be too much for work. So I just think it goes to good leaders care about their people. And if you really care about your people, you're going to be aware that they're different. They have different ways of communicating, different interests, different things are going to be meaningful. I mean, for some people, Starbucks gift card is fabulous. Other people don't ever drink coffee. And that, my husband is one. He doesn't drink coffee, or he used to not. Whenever he got a Starbucks gift card for work, he would come home and give it to me. I was like, yay, this is great. But it wasn't a benefit for him. Mm-hmm. And, we should know that. We should know what our people are interested in. Some people, it's like, go home 30 minutes early. That's going to be the best thing you can give them because they have little kids at home. Or don't be hard about making them come in. Their baby's sick. They need to work from home that day. That's more important to them than ever getting a Starbucks gift card. We got to learn. And I think important too is knowing enough about our team to know those kind of things. And people at different ages and life stages are going to want different things. So yeah, your young and older people may love happy hours, and that works for them. But the kind of people in midlife who are dealing with, maybe sick parents and little kids, you can't ask them to be spending extra time going to the happy hours or the comedy club or axe throwing or whatever you want to do after hours. Like, you got to respect people's time. And I think it's fine to offer some things that go beyond, like maybe a happy hour that starts and goes a little after normal times for the people who can stay, but nobody should feel bad if they can't at all. I mean, like, any mandatory fun does not end up being fun. I actually had a client once that had mandatory meditation. And to me, that just totally goes against meditation. Like, you can't force someone to meditate. That it defeats the purpose, right?
Forced relaxation.
Yes, you must relax now. And actually they were making people get to work early for mandatory meditation. So now everyone was driving in the middle of rush hour traffic, trying to get there on time for the mandatory meditation that just started their day off wrong, instead of, the whole point of meditation and starting your day off right. And with that, and I think the probably leader had a good idea, like, meditation can be really great. And a lot of people love it. Not everybody does, period. Like, a lot of people don't want to meditate at all, and you should not mandate it. But then also not realizing the start time of meditation during rush hour because he lived 2 minutes away from the office where no one else did. That's where we need, as leaders, sometimes we get so far removed and you don't know what it's like for the people who work for you. So that's why you need to surround yourself with people who are different and talk to your people and get feedback from your people, whether it's through, surveys or just chit chat, interviews, all these things. Like, you have to know the people who are working for you so that you can make decisions that benefit them and that don't end up having all sorts of negative consequences that you didn't intend.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Getting to know the people, especially for a small company, getting to know somebody one-on-one and being steadfast in your knowledge of that person as opposed to opinion from others. And especially on a management team that is not diverse is very important because, again, talking about that clique mentality, it takes one thing for somebody to balloon it and blow it out of proportion, and is a very ideal opportunity for other people to pile on, right? Mm-hmm. And if you took your time to know the person, understanding who this person is as a whole, it makes it easier to not be swept up in the opinions of others, and also not to rush into a rash decision that is not beneficial. Yeah. So that idea of getting to know an employee for that employee is very, very important because everything else, you'll be able to decipher what is noise and what is real. as Black women, African American women and men, we've always had to be in this position of taking things to the chin, being the peacemaker so that work goes on. But even with that, it's usually not recognized, right? Credit is usually to the bully. So because of connection, because of similarities or whatever. So it'll help a manager or a business owner to get to know people where it's possible, right? So that you can be objective in your decision making. So thank you for making that point. So let's talk about business sizes. So where do you think impact can be made more? In a smaller company or a corporate portfolio company where it's much bigger? Or do you think it doesn't matter the size, where proper impact is made, it usually shows?
I mean, I think all companies, all organizations have culture, and they all need to have a good, strong culture that promotes, engagement and well-being to succeed. Culture is difficult to shape and change, no matter the size of the company. So the good thing for, large corporations is they have more resources to help people and to address, culture. So you can have HR, learning and development, you can have ERGs, employee resource groups, more benefits. Usually there is a focus in large corporate organizations on culture to some extent, because they're doing all these things. They know, even if they don't call it culture, you got to have benefits. You got to have things to get your people feeling comfortable and doing their best work. So it's important in large corporations. It's really important. And then the other thing to be aware of in large corporations is you're going to have a lot of subcultures. So as you have, different departments and different locations and different specialties, all those groups of people can have their own subcultures that may benefit or may hurt the company. So there's a lot to pay attention to. It becomes, I don't even want to say more challenging. Culture, I think, can always be a challenge. It's not something that you do once and you're done with. So if a big company is like, yeah, we've created our values and it's in the handbook and we're good, and I have the HR team who deals with any problems, we're fine. That's not true. Like, you're always going to have problems and issues, and culture constantly changes too, as your people come and go, as what you're doing changes, as technology changes, culture changes as well. So you always have to be looking at culture, whether you're a big company or a small company, and what is working and what isn't working. So I think, employee feedback constant, as much as possible, is really, really helpful for all size organizations, but especially so in a big organization. And, depending on the structure, because I was going to say that, leadership team doesn't know all the people in a big organization, but they've got to be hearing from them somehow and have different ways for people to communicate. And then hopefully they have well-trained managers and team leaders, however they do it, who are helping with, to promote a good culture and create a good environment. And if they're not, then there needs to be a lot of training and focus on that manager level, because they're so important in creating culture, or in, they make or break the employee's experience. Like, there's some new statistics now, and your manager has more of an impact on overall happiness than your partner in some study. Like, it's so interesting. But then on a small organization, it's really easy to assume the culture is not really important, or we're fine, everything's great. And that's where it really goes to the leader is going to be the most important in setting the culture in a smaller organization. And it just depends. I mean, some leaders are really great leaders and they create a wonderful culture kind of without thinking about it. But then as the company starts growing, that's when they start having problems, because now the leader doesn't know everyone, and, their great personality doesn't smooth over whatever problems exist. Problems get kind of amplified as you get bigger and bigger. So I think it's really important for small companies to also focus on their culture. Even if it's a great culture, you got to think about what's working, what is so great about it, and how do we make sure this continues as we get bigger and bigger. And that's where, being a little bit formal about what kind of culture you want is important. So thinking through, what are our actual values? What are the things we're doing that create a great culture? And then there's plenty of small companies that have horrible cultures, and nobody's thinking about cultures, and people are just there chugging along doing their jobs, but they're not happy and they don't like the leader and they just don't know where else to go. And the company isn't going to be as successful. They're not as productive if your people aren't happy. So, and then I think, from my perspective, you can come in and make it's easier to make a change in a smaller culture like that, I think, than it is in a bigger company, if the leader is open to it and willing to change. I mean, if a lot of it comes from the leader, and some leaders don't care and they're not open to changing, or they'll say, there's these people, we have a lot of, high absenteeism, and people aren't meeting their goals and they're not doing good work, like fix them. But if the problem is coming from the leaders, bad attitude, or not being nice to people, or expecting far too much from the people, it's not going to change unless that person is willing to hear what they're doing to create the negative culture. So it really depends so much on the leaders. If the leaders are open to change and open to feedback and knowing, none of us are perfect. None of us are doing everything right. So we all could use some coaching and some help, and figuring out, I really think culture, you're dealing with people. You never know exactly how they're going to react or operate. So you have to try things and see what works. And something may be working great for a couple of years. And then you've got a bunch of new employees and they want something different. Whatever worked before doesn't work. So now you need to change it. It's constantly something you have to constantly tweak and change and think about to keep your company going well. And if there are plenty of companies that don't ever think about culture. They're just thinking about their strategy and their bottom line and how do we produce. And I think they're probably dealing with a lot more people problems rather than, I feel like if you're strategic and stop and think about culture, you can avoid a lot of problems. But if you don't do that piece, then what we see are business leaders who are constantly putting out fires with all these teams that are mad at each other. And there's fights here and there's an HR complaint and there's research. You got to look into this situation. But if they're more intentional about their culture and creating a good environment, you can stop a lot of that before it gets started. So I don't know, long-winded, babbling answer about, I think culture is important everywhere. I think you can change culture everywhere with the right people. It just kind of what you do to change it is going to vary depending on company size.
Absolutely. So talking about you coming in to work with a business, how can a business who's listening to us reach out to you? How can they find you? And please just tell us what that looks like.
Yeah, thank you. So the website is culturegrove.com. I'm also active on LinkedIn, and it's on LinkedIn. It's my full name, so it's Kristine Mackenzie Gentry. And you can also find Culture Grove on LinkedIn as well.
Beautiful. So for everybody listening, we are going to make Kristine's information available in the show notes. So if you missed the letter, it's okay. We will have the link for you. You can click in and find her on LinkedIn and on her website. So this was a great conversation to have. It's not too late to apply good behavior. Everybody's not perfect. Some of us are a product of what we're used to, our environment, but let the buck stop with you. Try to do different. And even if you're killing it in the game of being in the black, that's beautiful. However, you can have a further reach. We can see that all around us in the world. So Kristine left a lot of beautiful information and beautiful feedback to the questions that I asked. You can tell she's passionate about this and she knows what she's talking about. So, Kristine, something that I usually ask of my guests as we close out our conversation is to offer listeners a few gems or just one gem so that they have something to kind of think about or have in their back pocket.
I just think if we all realize and remember that culture is something we learn. So the things that we think, why is this person doing that? It's so weird. It doesn't make any sense. We pause and think, well, there's probably a reason for it that makes sense to them. There's something they learned. There's something in their background we try not to judge each other. Just try to remember that our cultures all evolved for a reason. They all work for a reason, in all the different places where we evolved. And whether, it has to do with the environment or religion or economic system, there's reasons for the way we all live that are so different. And it impacts how we see the world. It impacts how we deal with each other. But if we try to just pause and remember, okay, I learned what's right and wrong. This person learned what's right and wrong. We may just have some different ideas. It's okay. Let's try to work together and understand each other, get to know each other, and then you can understand where they're coming from. And I think we all ultimately want the same things. So if we start from the place of we're all good, we all care about the same things, I think we all do so much better, in the world.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. Respect everybody's decision. We are similar, but the nuances that makes us different. Everybody should be treated the way that they want to. That is the flip of the golden rule. Treat others as you would like them done unto you. I don't know how you talk to yourself, how you treat to yourself. So don't treat me how you treat you. Treat me how I want to be treated. So that was incredible. We can all learn and change and make the world a better place. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for listening. And we'll see you soon. Take care of each other. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Avik Beck's podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. It really helps us out. We'd love to hear your thoughts and continue the discussion. So join us on social media or drop us a message. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and keep pushing the boundaries of your world.